what's happened here, what's been endured. All the while, Yakima Nation standing in solidarity with the other Native nations, the other individual residents, whether they be Oregon State residents, Washington State residents from the various counties, cities, and everyone who's stood up on behalf of a concern for our livelihoods, a concern that balances itself against the economic well-being of our lands as well. We've spoken about the will of various corporations, various entities who are involved in the transport of the origins of these fossil fuels to the destinations of these fossil fuels. When I think about the true cause of what happened here a few days ago, I think about those corporations. I think about the individuals who are employed by those corporations, probably all very good men, women, probably come from good families, good homes. I think about the shareholder meetings that they have with regard to their constituents as they put forth their economic gains and our losses when it comes to their endeavor, their pursuit of an economic well-being. And I wonder to myself, how many people are involved in that picture? How many people truly are part of those corporations? How many people are truly employed? What type of benefit is coming directly to their families, to their homes, and to their children's? How many shareholders are part of these various corporations who are involved with regard to this transport of fossil fuels? Who is all involved in that situation? Who truly is reaping the economic gain? And as we've always stated, we believe that to be a very small percentage when it comes to the impact that's felt by everyone with regard to events like happened the other day. And so we come forth standing in unification with the town of Mosier to hear the words of the mayor, what she's had to endure in her role as an elected official of this town, the other people who've had to endure, the residents, the first immediate responders, the fire chief, all of his staff, all the law enforcement from the various jurisdictions, and everyone who's going to reap some form of consequence from the event of the last few days, and the potential for future consequences to be endured collectively by us if the continued effort of fossil fuel by rail transport happens. There was a call that came forth from various leadership in the last few days. They said they wanted to put a moratorium asking that commitment from Union Pacific on any oil transport as the facts of everything that happened here comes forth. The Yakima Nation's stance with regard to fossil fuels, oil, coal, and the other fuels that are out there has been zero tolerance. We do not want fossil fuels at all coming through the Columbia River Gorge at all. And that's because we like to think, like many of you, that we truly see what's at hand. That we truly see that at the sacrifice of short-term economic gain, we are sacrificing and putting at risk long-term benefit and well-being of our future generations. Our children, our grandchildren, those yet to come. It is well known amongst the Native people that we think far out, oftentimes in reference to 7 generations. Myself, my fellow leaders, the Yakima Nation, surrounding other nations and tribes that are present and that represent themselves in this manner, we'd like to think as far as we can, far beyond 7 generations. I put a call out to anyone who has an ability to say anything about this situation. If you're an Oregon State resident, if you're a resident of the city of Mosier, resident of the city of various jurisdictions, counties, the state of Washington, anyone present in the Northwest, call upon your leaders of the various jurisdictions to put a zero tolerance, no fossil fuel transport through the Northwest at all.
Who gives the leaders, past, current and future, the right to strip the young children of what should be a birthright to at least live on this planet, live on this earth, consume the food, the four-leggeds, the fish, the plants, the fruit, without fear of getting cancer if they consume too much of this gift that was given to us. That is here, that was placed here for us to take care of, to respect, to honor. And it's always been a statement of Chairman Gowdy that it's not a question of if it happens. It's been a statement of our chairman, Chairman Blue, not if a coal train tips over into our bay, into our rivers. Not if 50,000 tons of coal blows into the Salish Sea, it's when. What are the consequences? And who gives us the right to do something that is called progress at the expense of this gift that we have taken for granted for the last 160 to 200 years and all but destroyed? And I believe 100% what Chairman Gowdy just said about the consequences. And what have we sowed over the last 160 years? And what are the consequences, the destruction that our future generations are going to reap from the decisions and the things that we have allowed to take place, and the people pacified by promises of jobs? We say no more. Enough is enough. We stand with Yakima, Umatilla, Nez Perce, Warm Springs, your small town here, and all of the people who are affected. 57 tribes of the AT&I signed back in 2013 opposition to the export of fossil fuels through the Pacific Northwest, foreseeing the proposed plans, the largest coal port in North America proposed up in our homeland. So we stand united. It is our prayer that some moral excellence comes from our leadership, whatever your belief is, whether your belief is traditional, cultural, biblical. Everywhere you look, leadership, even biblical, has moral obligations from their God, from their Creator, from their people, directives. And it's time to stop destroying these gifts that we have been gifted. It's time to move forward in a new direction. And if we can't do it for ourselves, we have to stand united and do it for the children and the future generations and the unborn. I stand.
Be invited by Yakima Nation, Umatilla, Warm Springs, and Nez Perce. And one of the real honors in my job is the chance to learn from and partner with our tribal allies, as well as so many of all of you in this community. And Columbia Riverkeeper is an organization that works to protect clean water, and we're a nonprofit, and we can, we represent all of you. And it's a way that we can band together with many other great organizations here in the Gorge and throughout the Northwest. And we are, as someone who works to protect the Columbia, one of the biggest threats we have right now is fossil fuel transport. As Chair Gowdy so eloquently put, it's time for action. It's time for our state and federal leaders to take action, to do everything in their power to protect our people, to protect our water, and to stop this dangerous fossil fuel transport. My main point is to be here is to introduce one of the leaders of the Waterkeeper Alliance, the leader of the Waterkeeper Alliance. Robert F. Kennedy is the president of the Waterkeeper Alliance, and he's the chief prosecuting attorney for Hudson Riverkeeper. And Waterkeeper Alliance, Columbia Riverkeeper, is part of a worldwide organization of 200 groups that live locally, live in a watershed, and our goal is to be an on-the-water presence to protect that water. So it's a growing movement. There's groups in China and Iraq and all over Africa and Central America. Started on the Hudson River in New York, and we're very proud to be part of it. Mr. Kennedy has a long history in this area. He and his family have long relationships with our tribes here in the Northwest. So after we are done here, I literally called Bobby yesterday, and he agreed to come down on a 6 a.m. flight this morning too, because he wanted to be here. He dropped everything to be here. He does have a flight this afternoon, so we're gonna have limited time afterwards. But I would like to introduce Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Please excuse my voice. I'm very happy to be here. I want to start by thanking the first responders who, my understanding from talking to people in the town, from talking to some of the tribal leaders, and from talking to relatives I have here, is they've all done an extraordinary job of responding to the emergency and protecting the public safety. I also want to thank the tribes and the tribal leaders, Chairman Gowdy and Chairman Green, and Councilmember Julius, and the other tribal leaders are here. I've been working with the Umatilla and the Yakima and the Nez Perce and the Mooney and many of the other tribes in the Pacific Northwest for almost 30 years on environmental issues. These groups have been the conscience of our community. They've been urging us to take the long term. I've learned from them so much about that. We're not protecting the environment so much for the sake of the fishes and the birds. We're protecting it for our own sake because we recognize that nature is the infrastructure of our communities. That if we want to meet our obligation as a generation, as a civilization, as a nation, which is to create communities for our children that provide them with the same opportunities for dignity and enrichment and prosperity and safety and good health as our parents gave us, we've got to start by protecting our environmental infrastructure. The air we breathe, the water we drink, the wildlife, the fisheries, the public lands, those things that are part of the commons, the shared resources of our communities, those things that can't be reduced to private property ownership, but by their nature are the property of all the community. The animals, the salmon, the waterways, the fisheries, the landscapes that connect us to our past, to our history, that provide context to our communities, and that are the source ultimately of our values and our virtues and our character as a people, as well as the life support system for our communities. And this is something the tribes have recognized, that yes, we need prosperity, we want to have development, but we want sane development, we want moral development, we want rational development. And fossil fuels or dinosaur fuels are immoral, they're criminal, they're harmful to our communities. The only way that they survive is through subsidies and through government interventions that give them an advantage in the marketplace. And told us again and again that we have to look beyond the immediate, instantaneous cash flow. That we don't, you hear again and again, we have to choose between economic prosperity and environmental protection. And the tribes have been saying for generations that's a false choice. In 100% of the situations, good environmental policy is identical to good economic policy if we want to measure. If we want to measure our economy, and this is how we ought to be measuring it, based upon how it produces jobs and the dignity of jobs over the generations, and how it preserves the values of the assets of our community, including human life. And if, on the other hand, we want to do what the big polluters want us to do, and the moguls of Bakken crude, which is to treat the Pacific Northwest as if it was a business in liquidation, convert our natural resources to cash as quickly as possible, have a few years of pollution-based prosperity, we can generate an instantaneous cash flow for that industry, and we can have a few years of pollution-based prosperity for them. We can make a few people billionaires by impoverishing the rest of us. our children are going to pay for our joyride, and they're going to pay for it with denuded landscapes, and poor health, and huge cleanup costs, and destroyed communities, and injuries, and fires, and they're going to pay for that for generations, and cleanup costs that they'll never be able to afford. Environmental injury is deficit spending as a way of loading the cost of our generation's prosperity onto the backs of our children. Now, one of the reasons I was so anxious to come up here was I have family ties in this community. My niece is the president of this little elementary school here. And I have two cousins who live in this town. And my niece, Kate Skakel, who's here today, was sitting out in that field when that bomb train exploded. And I've talked to Chief Appleton, who's the head of the fire department here, and he told me that we narrowly averted a terrible catastrophe. My relatives moved to this valley because of the wind, and it's almost windy here all the time. But the day that fire started was one of the rare calm days, and he told me that if it had been windy, we could have had a catastrophe of the kind they had in Makmaganta. And the water keepers, there are 300 water keepers now around the world. And we've been deeply involved in trying to stop bomb train traffic all over North America because we saw what it did in Makmaganta. And it killed 47 people in that community, a community very much like this, and a raid very much like this along the rail lines. It also poisoned the Chowdhury River. And even today, last week, scientists who have been studying the impacts, and there's very little oil release, but the impact on the Chowdhury has been devastating and apparently permanent. The deformities in the fish, the significant reduction in biomass that is now produced by that river. A gallon of oil spilled into a waterway will kill the fish in 1 million gallons of water. And they'll poison people at much lower rates than that. Benzene, toluene, xylene. These things are very potent carcinogens and endocrine disruptors that change sexual development in children. This is a chemical assault on our families, on our communities, and on our children. And we have to treat these risks the same way that we treat terrorist risks or other kind of risks. And, we've been negotiating with the Department of Transportation as Chief Gowdy or Chairman Gowdy said, Union Pacific is a common carrier. They can't refuse these trains. DOT and the industry has lobbied so that the state governments have very little power to control what goes through this town. The organization, the agency that does that is responsible for protecting public safety here is an agency in Washington, D.C., which is the Department of Transportation. And we've been negotiating for many years with the Department of Transportation. We did inspections of the rail lines all over this country. We found, the water keepers found 47% of the bridges are unsafe for oil car transportation. And we've been negotiating with the agency, and they say to us, well, we're responding. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to ban the 111 cars. This is a new industry. In 2008, there were only 4,000 rail cars hauling oil in this country. In 2014, there were 493,000. It went up, 10 or 20 times in that period. Well, this is an industry people really don't know how to regulate. But DOT says, well, we're doing our best. We're gonna ban the cars that we know are unsafe with the 111 cars. We're gonna replace them with the 1232s. Well, they did that here. And they said, once we do that, there's not gonna be any danger to these communities anymore. And we said, well, the infrastructure's bad. But here they said, well, we inspected the rail a week ago, and it's in this particular little stretch of rail is in perfect condition. It could not be in better condition. And they said, well, We got them to reduce the amount of flammable gases in Bakken crude because, as you all know, Bakken crude is the most flammable kind and an explosive kind of crude oil. It's more explosive, more flammable than raw gasoline. These are, anybody who says this is not a bomb train, the DOT says we can expect 12 derailments a year of Bakken crude oil trains. They admit that. So it's just, what kind, it's Russian roulette for these communities through whom these rails run. Which one of you is going to be the victim of one of those 12 derailments? So they did everything right here. Everything the regulatory agency says that it needs to do to protect these communities. It got rid of the rail car. It stripped the most flammable gases from the Bakken crude, inspected the rail, and made sure this rail, which is one of it's a straightaway. It's a straightaway. You can't go derail on the straightaway. That's what they tell us. But here on a straightaway with recently inspected tracks, with brand new unbreakable rail cars, and with the gas stripped and made safer, as safe as they say they can make it, it still exploded. And thank God we didn't have a win that day, because I don't know what would have happened. None of us know what would have happened to this community. And what is the reaction of the infrastructure of the oil industry and their indentured servants in our political process? Their answer is to increase our reliance on fossil fuels and to make the Columbia River Gorge the conveyance for all fossil fuels, not only to the United States and the West Coast, but also to all of Asia. So we've got, as Chairman Gowdy said, you've got the largest oil export terminal in the United States, in North America, ever built, now proposed.